at exactly 0 for 14 hours on the morning of the operation. At the port of Novorossiysk, a Russian naval officer standing watch on the deck of a $470 million improved Kilo-class submarine conducts his routine security sweep, completely unaware that a sophisticated unmanned underwater vehicle is positioned less than 3 feet from his vessel's hull. In precisely 30 seconds, what begins as a standard night watch rotation will transform into a catastrophic failure that effectively paralyzes the Russian Black Sea Fleet's operational capabilities.
However, the critical failure in Russian defensive posture was not simply the vulnerability to attack.
It was their complete inability to recognize they had been methodically maneuvered into a planned engagements, an area orchestrated by Ukraine's security service months in advance. Ukrainian military intelligence understood a fundamental tactical reality as long as the Ilyushin 30-8 November maritime patrol aircraft remained airborne and operational. Any unmanned surface vehicle represented a $50,000 expendable asset with zero probability of mission success. To successfully neutralize the submarine target, Ukrainian forces first had to eliminate the surveillance aircraft. At 20-300 hours at a concealed deep inside Ukrainian-controlled territory, a modified reconnaissance drone designated Beaver begins its takeoff, rolling lifts into the freezing night air.
This represents Ukraine's premier long-range strike platform, purpose-built for deep penetration missions. Immediately following takeoff, the onboard flight computer executes a programmed descent, leveling off at an extremely low altitude of just 150 feet above ground level. At this altitude, the aircraft physically exploits the curvature of the Earth and natural terrain features, rendering itself effectively invisible to long-range S-400 surface air missile system search radars conducting sweeps from Crimean position. Inside the unmanned aerial vehicle, all communication modules remain powered down.
There is no satellite uplink, no radio control signal, no video telemetry feed. Activating any transmission system would illuminate Russian electronic warfare sensors. Instead, the Beaver operates in fully autonomous flight mode, guided by military-grade anti-jamming global positioning system technology coupled with a high-precision laser ring gyroscope inertial navigation system. For 3 hours, the unmanned aerial vehicle cuts through freezing air, coasting past multiple Russian air defense zones with mathematical precision. As the aircraft crosses the final security perimeter of Novorossiysk Air Base, Russian communication channels remain completely silent. The modified Beaver has penetrated the defensive perimeter undetected. The tactical trap has been set with surgical precision. At 0140-7 hours, 3 miles from the runway threshold, the Beaver drone executes a slight altitude correction to clear electrical transmission cables climbing to 200 feet elevation. That additional 50 feet of altitude represents a violation of tactical survival in contested airspace. On the edge of the tarmac, the rotating search radar array of a Pantsir-S-1 air defense system registers an anomalous return. At point-blank range, the rotating wooden propeller generates a specific micro-Doppler signature that Russian target recognition software identifies instantly. The radar display flashes from passive standby green to urgent strobing red alert status. The Russian airbase transitions to combat alert with mechanical precision. Klaxon air raid sirens begin to wail. The Pantsir-S-1 vehicle reacts faster than human reflexes, its hydraulic turret system rotating 90 degrees in less than 1 second, orienting its dual 30mm automatic cannons in 12 surface -to-air missile tubes directly toward the incoming threat. The alert propagates instantaneously across the entire secure military communications network. 300 meters away at Novorossiysk harbor, the emergency telephone rings in the harbor command center. The garrison jolts into maximum readiness condition. Searchlights activate, sweeping the black water. The engines of Raptor-class patrol boats roar to full power. Shore-based sonar operators maximize their equipment gain settings, flooding the underwater acoustic spectrum with active energy. To Russian defensive commanders, this appears to be a desperate attempt by Ukrainian forces to achieve a propaganda victory. The Pantsir operator flips the protective cover off the missile launch button. The fire control radar achieves solid continuous target lock. To any external observer, it appears the Ukrainian operational plan has been completely compromised. The situation appears to be a complete operational failure. But here is the critical tactical detail that most analysts initially overlook. Just as the Pantsir operator initiates the engagement sequence, the Beaver drone does not execute evasive maneuvers. Instead, it maintains precise altitude, flying exactly 50 feet directly above the stationary Ilyushin 30-8 November maritime patrol aircraft parked on the concrete hard stand. The Ukrainian security service operator transmits the detonation command code. The warhead inside the Beaver functions as a directional fragmentation device oriented toward the Earth. The detonation casing splits open, unleashing a cone-shaped pattern of 2,000 performed tungsten penetrator cubes. The Pantsir surface-to-minus air missile launches a split second later, intercepting the unmanned aerial vehicle and vaporizing it in a fireball. But the Russian defensive system is engaging a threat that has already completed its mission. On the ground, the hail of tungsten fragments shreds the upper surface of the Ilyushin 30-8 November. The penetrators punch through the delicate fiberglass radome structure on the aircraft's dorsal spine, instantly destroying the Novella P-30-8 anti-submarine warfare sensor suite. Inside the fuselage, fragments slice through aluminum structural members, severing hydraulic lines and reducing cockpit avionics into sparking wreckage. The Russian pilot sprinting toward his aircraft skids to a halt, observing aviation fuel leaking from perforated wing tanks. The aircraft has not been destroyed by catastrophic explosion. It has been executed with precision targeting. Within 5 seconds, Ukraine has effectively blinded the Russian Black Sea Fleet's primary maritime surveillance capability. The $20 million airborne surveillance platform is operationally destroyed. The Pantsir crew celebrates, believing they achieved a successful intercept, completely unaware they just protected an functional aircraft. At 0 to 15 hours, the destruction of the Ilyushin 30-8 November triggers an immediate strategic complication. With their airborne surveillance capability eliminated, Russian command at Novorossiysk realizes their vulnerability. The base commander implements maximum defensive protocols. At the harbor, tugboats begin pushing obsolete barge hulls into the main shipping channel, deliberately scuttling them to create a physical barrier across the harbor entrance. Simultaneously, the acoustic environment underwater transforms from passive monitoring into active saturation. Every shore-based sonar array is set to maximum active power output. The high-frequency acoustic pings saturate the water column, reflecting off every rock formation, marine light, and metallic hull in the bay. On the surface, Raptor-class patrol boats execute aggressive figure-8 patterns. Their crews deploy random stun grenades into the water to neutralize any incoming combat swimmers or unmanned vehicles. Sailors line the piers with thermal imaging scopes and portable surface-to-minus air missile systems. The Sea Baby unmanned underwater vehicle enters the outer defensive perimeter. In Kiev, the telemetry display shows acoustic interference levels spiking off measurement scales. The harbor has become a sensory kill zone saturated with detection capability. We cannot proceed with direct approach, the mission commander states. The sonar density is too high. If we operate the propulsion motor even at 10% power output, they will detect the cavitation signature instantly. Months of operational planning and the destruction of the Ilyushin 30-8 November all depend on the next tactical decision. At 0 to 30-5 hours, the Ukrainian operator provides absolute silence. The electric propulsion motors power down completely. The active guidance systems enter standby mode. To any electronic detection sensor, the unmanned vehicles effectively cease to exist. This represents the operational genius. The Russians have transformed the harbor into a chaotic environment of active sonar noise, creating a deafening background acoustic signature. By attempting to detect everything, they have made it impossible to identify the quietest threat. The unmanned vehicles are now drifting passively. The natural tidal current of the Black Sea flows into the harbor at a steady 2 knots. The drones ride this invisible underwater conveyor, moving exactly at the velocity of the surrounding water mass. They float directly past the frantic patrol boats. The sonar operators, overwhelmed by acoustic clutter, filter out the slow-moving contacts as drifting debris. The unmanned vehicles approach the steel boom net barriers designed to intercept surface torpedoes, but which incorporate a gap near the seabed to allow idle flow. The drones, ballasted to neutral buoyancy just inches off the bottom, slip underneath the heavy steel mesh like smoke passing under a door. Inside the harbor, The massive black shape of the Kilo-class submarine blocks out the faint illumination from the surface. In Kiev, the operations room is silent. The telemetry display shows the distance to target decreasing 100 feet, 80 feet, 50 feet. The operator can observe the submarine's 7- bladed propeller through the drone's low-light camera system. At 0409 hours, the Ukrainian Security Service mission commander in Kiev speaks a single cold word: detonate. 2,000 miles away, the logic circuits inside the 2C Baby unmanned underwater vehicles process the command in 3 milliseconds. The electric motors activate once, driving the warheads firmly against the submarine's steel hull. Then the environment turns white. Both unmanned vehicles detonate simultaneously directly beneath the submarine's stern section. 1,000 pounds of high-grade explosive material transforms into superheated gas instantaneously. The water, being incompressible, acts like a solid anvil, forcing 100% of that explosive energy upward. On the surface, the pierced structure jumps to feet into the air. A massive geyser of mud and white foam shoots 200 feet into the sky. The acoustic signature shatters windows 3 miles away in the city center. The warheads utilized a programmable millisecond delay fuse. By delaying the detonation until the warhead was pressed against the hull by initial impact momentum, the explosion creates a water hammer effect. The pressure wave punches through the submarine's outer light hull and impacts the inner pressure hull. The shock wave enters the steel pressure vessel and becomes trapped inside, reflecting off internal bulkhead structures and amplifying its own destructive power. The result is catastrophic structural failure. The massive steel rudder assembly snaps off. The propeller shaft is twisted violently out of alignment, shredding the watertight seals in the engineering compartment. The submarine stern disintegrates structurally. The Black Sea rushes into the engineering spaces at 600 pounds per square inch of hydraulic force. The 30,000-ton Kilo-class submarine begins to emit a terrifying sound of twisting metal under stress. The stern section drops like a stone, forcing the bow upward. The vessel lists heavily, tilting 30 degrees to starboard. The supposedly unsinkable missile carrier is now operationally destroyed. 20-4 hours later, high-resolution commercial satellite imagery confirms the outcome. The submarine is resting on the harbor bottom, its conning tower barely breaking the surface at an abnormal angle. But the satellite photographs reveal an even greater tactical irony. In their panic immediately after the blast, Russian forces frantically sank two additional barges across the harbor entrance. In doing so, they successfully trapped their own remaining fleet inside the harbor. By destroying the Ilyushin 30-8 November maritime patrol aircraft and the Kilo-class submarine within the same 20-4 operational window, Ukraine has effectively blinded and neutralized the Black Sea Fleet simultaneously. The fleet is now operationally paralyzed by psychological factors as much as material losses. The remaining Russian naval vessels cease offensive patrolling. Logistics ships refuse to enter the harbor, fearing invisible mines or additional unmanned strike vehicles. For the next 90-6 hours, the entire supply chain supporting the Black Sea Fleet freezes completely. Artillery batteries that depend on naval supply lines begin rationing ammunition. Ukrainian forces exploit the momentum, advancing while the Russian rearguard chases phantom threats. But the most severe damage is psychological rather than material. Russian commanders are no longer planning offensive operations. They're combating paranoia. Every ripple in the water resembles a Sea Baby unmanned vehicle. Every raid or return resembles a Beaver drone. The fear of the invisible unmanned threat has become a weapon more powerful than the explosive devices themselves. This operation represents a fundamental shift in naval warfare doctrine. A relatively inexpensive unmanned aerial vehicle successfully neutralized a $20-4 million maritime patrol aircraft. Two unmanned underwater vehicles, drifting passively with tidal currents, successfully destroyed a $470 million submarine protected by multiple defensive layers. The total cost of Ukrainian assets deployed approximately $300,000. The total cost of Russian assets destroyed or neutralized nearly $500 million, not accounting for the operational paralysis of an entire fleet. This represents a return on investment of over 1,600 to 1. The tactical lessons are unambiguous. Modern naval forces cannot rely solely on traditional defensive systems designed for 20th-century threat vectors. The combination of autonomous navigation, passive approach tactics, and precision timing has fundamentally altered the calculus of naval force protection. Russian commanders learned a harsh lesson in modern warfare. The most dangerous threats are not always the loudest or the fastest. Sometimes the most lethal weapon is the one that makes no sound at all, drifting silently with the tide, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ukraine has demonstrated that with surgical precision, tactical patience, and innovative employment of unmanned systems, a numerically inferior force can achieve strategic dominance over a conventionally superior adversary. The Black Sea Fleet remains trapped, both physically and psychologically, by barriers of their own construction. This operation will be studied in military academies for decades as a textbook example of asymmetric warfare executed with surgical precision and devastating effect.